And welcome back. Every week, we bring you the most amazing, really, entrepreneurs is my focus, but women entrepreneurs is even more near and dear to my heart. So, through a mutual relationship, I have met today's guest, Kimberly Wilkerson, and she is amazing. And I'm so glad that she has had some time today to share her story, the growth and her journey, and ways that we can support her new clothing brand. So, Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think the best part about what I do is I get to meet the most amazing people. They're talented, they have stories, they're empowering. And I learn so much every week when I have the opportunity to meet with somebody new. So you and I met through a mutual friend of ours. And he was like, Rhonda, I would normally not do this and put you on the spot, but I have a friend of mine, and I think she is exactly what you are looking for when you're bringing guests onto your show. So, first of all, because I know we're going to be speaking for a little bit today, tell everybody you have a great story, you have a great history, you are philanthropic. So, let's start with who you are as a person before we jump into who you are as a brand.
Sure. I always say when I'm asked that question, I say I'm all of the above, right? Like all of us, there's so many different facets to our lives, but I'll start back as a kid, really. I remember as a young child, and then even as a teenager, my dream was to become an astronaut. As a lot of kids dream, right? But I'm a huge believer in the power of dreams, because even wanting to be an astronaut, I started making decisions in my life at an early age and having vision about what I needed to do to achieve that dream. So I met with counselors in junior high school and said, I need to speak to someone in the Naval Academy because I want to go to the Naval Academy, then on to work for NASA. And it was interesting looking back because that dream changed, but I saw at a young age the start of patterns in my life and setting goals for myself that really then helped me get to the point that I'm at today. So again, that changed. I actually ended up loving theater and music and things like that. And so it morphed into, well, I think I really want to go into theater because I was good at it. I was a singer in high school and thought musical theater is where I want to be. In college, I started in that, was in a musical theater troupe that I loved. Majored for a brief time in theater, but decided that I also love science. Like there were all of these pieces to me. So I still performed, but I decided that pursuing an actual career in performance was not exactly what I wanted. Long story short, I ended up deciding that speech pathology was the right decision for my life. I could
You're
take
like,
different.
okay.
Right, I know. And actually, I had a degree before speech pathology. I had a degree in agricultural communications, which
Yeah.
also I know is random, but I loved talking. I loved performing. I loved being a spokesperson. And so that was my first degree. Following that, I actually ended up competing for the Miss America program as Miss Wyoming. Loved that experience, was a public speaker for a year and able to represent my home state of Wyoming. I now live in Idaho, so I'm just right next door, but love Wyoming. And following that experience with being a public speaker for a year, then I went on a mission for my church for 18 months and had a great opportunity again to be able to share ideas and concepts and truths in a public setting. So really enjoyed that, came back, knew I wanted to go on to grad school, finally settled on speech pathology. And so I pursued that course, and it was a great course to pursue for me because it brought in a lot of different things that I was good at, that I really loved, and knew that I could make a great career out of that with passion. And so the whole time that I was in graduate school for speech pathology, I was thinking about a fashion company. Again, very different from what I had started on. However, I knew that at one point I wanted a fashion company. So in the margins of my notes in graduate school, you would see dress designs. And I was not a great artist by any means. Again, my talents resided more with music and writing. However, I still would be able to doodle these dresses and then write about them, what I wanted on them. And so over the years of building my career as a speech pathologist, I did things on the side. I took a few art classes so I could become a a better drawer so I could actually get my idea from my
Which of
brain.
course now is all done on the computer, but that's okay.
I know. That's right. So I was able to get my ideas onto paper a little bit better. I was learning about color and texture, learning about some of the icons in the industry, thinking about what I wanted to do with fashion. And that was about a 15, almost 20-year journey, actually, from the time that I started and had this idea to the point that I actually launched a fashion brand. And yeah, and what's fascinating about that is that I really took my experience as a speech pathologist and the positive psychology that is part of communication and the neuroscience that I loved. I'll just throw in here, at one time I seriously looked at medical school because I love neuroscience. And I thought, well, maybe I should pursue becoming, a neurologist or something along those lines. And so always studying neuroscience and loving that as a speech pathologist. And when I decided to launch, I had this opportunity actually to go tropical to work as a speech pathologist. I had the option to go down to the US Virgin Islands, which I would have loved because I scuba dive and snorkel and love the ocean. And it was kind of this precipice that I came to where I said, all right, if I go to the Virgin Islands, it'll be great, but the trajectory of my life will change. Versus if I start this company, I can always go back to the islands if I really want to. So I decided to take that leap. And I started thinking, okay, what do I want this to look like? And all I could keep doing was writing all of these positive words and positive phrases, and everything that I did with trying to design had language to it. Understandably, I got that with my experience, but I decided I need to merge language with fashion because I know how to do it. That's what I'm good at. And I understand the power of language. And thus, Token Clothing Company was born.
I love it. So first of all, what I want to say, which I think is so important, is that so many times we have guests that come on the show and they're creatives. And I refer to you as a creative because you've allowed yourself to not only think about what you want to do, but you've followed and pursued that. So congratulations, first of all, on of those little successes. But we get people that sometimes come on the show and it's this, I hate to use the word sometimes one and done. They've had this great one experience and this one life event that has given them the trajectory. Mm-hmm. But in your scenario, what I love is it's almost cultural, right? And I don't mean cultural from where you've grown up, but you've created so much knowledge. And sometimes people think that if you start with one and you go into another, you're like, where is the connector? But I feel like listening to you, you can see where all these different connectors have come into play. And I think it's because I'm welcoming you into the world of being a creative with myself and some of the other ladies that we work with. So just for the sake of time, give me one impact that you've had in your journey before the Token Clothing Company.
Sure. There's many, so I'm thinking which one I should share. Let me share this. One of the biggest impacts for me has been understanding the value of patience and timing. And that's important to me. So I'm a woman of faith and I pray a lot and I want to be led and directed by God. That's who I am. And certainly having a dream for 20 years and wondering why it wasn't happening and why things weren't lining up and pieces that maybe continued to happen in other experiences I had and looking at those and saying, well, this doesn't even make sense. I thought I'm supposed to do this. So why is my path being pushed this way? But I have learned, even though my timing isn't always meant with applause, I would love that if everything worked out my way. It doesn't. And I have to trust the timing and the process to then become who I need to be to do what God wants me to do. And I have felt that through these 20 years.
I love that. So let's start with jumping into Token Clothing Company. You've now said to yourself, I've been thinking this, I've been feeling it. I myself am somebody that likes to manifest, right? And sit on something. I know that sounds funny, but you talk to different people, and some people say, my therapy is to journal, my therapy is to pray. Everybody has something, I think, a little bit different. For me, at least, I know that when I want to know whether or not something is right and I'm in alignment, I need to know if I'm manifesting it and what that vision looks like so I can create my roadmap, right? So it's a roadmap to success. So when you were creating your brand, and we know that you've dragged in all these different pieces of all of your life experience, what was your first major hurdle that you were faced with?
Sure. So it was the decision to move forward with prototyping and production. And here's why. It was 2020, 2021, right? Our world had
In the worst
changed
time ever.
dramatically. Yes. And around that time too, between actually prototyping and production, my costs rose about 60% for the raw cost of what it would be. And I'm like, my goodness, how am I going to manage all of this? Should I really do this? Am I going to bring this to market right now? Look at the costs. That was really the first hurdle in making that decision, and understanding the financial pieces of that. And again, I felt that I was kind of at this cliff. Like, am I going to jump, or am I going to maybe try to find a different way down? And I said, you're going to jump, because you've wanted this for, again, 20 years. You need to move forward with faith. But that, it was actually a pretty big decision, and then figuring out how to move forward with those pieces of that cost increase.
Well, you know, what happens is, again, you have created this vision of what you wanted to do, but all of the things that you've talked about from your life experience, none of them were related to business. So
Right.
now you are not just a creative, and you are, have always been, and it sounds like you've always been an independent, but now you are a business owner, and that takes on a completely different description. So you get ready to launch. What was the experience like for you when you first were going through the launch? Like, walk me through, you know, you have the vision, you have the, you're going through production. I think a lot of times when we're talking to people, or when I'm speaking to people, they don't really understand all the little dots to make, oh, I get that on Etsy, or oh, I could do this over here. And they're not really understanding the core of running a business. So walk us through really quickly what that cycle was like for you.
Sure. So at the beginning, it was, okay, I've got to find fabric that I want, and even deciding what's my first line going to be. And I decided, I mean, I am a big brainstormer, so I'll have big sticky notes that I stick on my door, and I'm drawing and I'm writing and I'm looking, and I have to be very like physically involved in order to create what I want. I can't just keep it up here or put it in a Google Doc. It doesn't work for me. So I decided, and this was interesting, but I decided on pajamas, which I learned that because of COVID, it was kind of the golden era of pajamas. I decided on that before I did the research on the projections for the market. But I said, you know what? Here is something that is intimate. When we wear pajamas, usually it's a very cozy experience. And I wanted that language, again, on the fabric to be able to be part of that intimate and cozy experience. So deciding the product was first. And then I started working with mills to get fabric samples, because again, I had this idea of the quality that I wanted, what I would need for that language. And so I had to get all of the samples. And then I actually did market research with women on what are the top affirmations that you would want on pajamas, the top I am statements. So I took the top 3 based upon that research. And then I also had to do research on I did the top 5 colors that they would want to have for pajamas. And so, I mean, it was a matter of going to Home Depot, getting a bunch of paint chips, putting it on a board that I could take pictures of and sending it out, you know, doing this market research. Like, just like you said, there are so many dots that you don't even know exist until you're there and you're like, okay, what's the next step? Shoot from the hip and let's go. And so then it was, okay, we have the fabric. Now I have to go to a dye factory because I have to get samples of what that specific fabric that my mill created for me will look like with the dye. And then you have to get samples with the language to make sure that's correct. And then, of course, you go to production, and there were some issues with production, which is fine. And the whole time I'm doing this, I'm meeting with a factory, cut and sew factory, that fortunately was down the road. That was such a great experience to have the factory close, so I could be learning what they do as well as telling them what I needed and showing them, again, my drawings. This is what I want it to look like, but I'm not a fashion designer, so can you guys work with this? They're like, sure, we can. But going back and forth with prototyping and making sure that it looked good, and we had to change the top a little bit because it was too short for pajamas, and all of these pieces to finally say, okay, here's the prototype. Is it okay? Here's how we move forward with production, both from the mill and the factory. And then you have the actual business pieces. I need models. So I started calling friends and people I knew that, were different sizes and shapes, saying, I think you'd be great for this. Will you do this? Because we had a photo shoot the summer before we launched. And then there's all those other business pieces, making sure that you are getting your marketing ready, the website ready, delegating to people that you can. I always felt that there were 20 different lanes going like this, right? And as an entrepreneur, you are jumping across the lanes. You have people that you might be delegating some work to, but truly, I have been a solopreneur. I'm not a website designer. I have an extraordinary friend who does great. She's helped me with that. I'm not a photographer. I was able to hire the photography, but you still are managing everything. So, and then there are things that come up that you're like, oh, I didn't know about that. Because you don't know what you don't know. So you're like, okay, let's address this and deal with it and keep going. It's so important to keep that vision at the end, right? To know where those lanes are going and to keep that right in front of you. Your why, we always hear that, what is your why? But that's so critical, because you really could get stuck and hung up and say, I'm out of here, I'm heading to that tropical island. It's way easier than this. So it's important to make sure that you have that vision and know the impact that you want to leave on the world.
I love that. That's such a beautiful statement. Now, you now come to market and your items are ready. Where are you selling your items, and how did you determine what market was the best market for you from, from that perspective?
Sure. So I started online and I knew my avatar. So I knew what I needed to do in way of marketing. And again, I don't love social media. So I'm like, wow, I've got to get someone to do this piece for me that loves it.
Another lane,
right?
by
Another
the way.
lane. Like, I knew my story. I knew what was important. I could share all of that content, but I had to have someone that could take it, run with it. And I do, thank goodness. So I just started again online. I was working full time as a speech pathologist. And so it was challenging to balance professional career with, getting this business up and running. And I did a little bit here, a little bit there, moved forward in April. So we launched in October of 2022. In April of 2023, we were able to partner with Refuge for Women to do a philanthropic part of the business, which I had always wanted. Even 20 years ago, as I thought, what's fashion going to look like? My thought was, okay, in any business I do, I want to make sure that I am connecting women and that we are serving and giving as much as we can. So this thought came to me, I remember, in fall of 2022, shortly after I had launched. It just took a while to, again, do the work to talk with different organizations and say, what is the best route to go? But with Refuge for Women, we're able to partner with them in a way where we're able to gift pajamas. Customers can gift a pair of pajamas with purpose to women that they serve. And these women are women who have been sex trafficked. And I thought initially, who could benefit from these pajamas the most?
Yeah.
And when you think about women who have had those experiences, they need that love the most. And so not only can customers gift a pair of pajamas, but they also get to write a personal note of encouragement to one of the women that they choose from our website. And then Token Clothing Company delivers and fulfills that set of pajamas as well as the note. So that was important to me, and it always will be, being able to have those partnerships. So again, we were still just online. And then I realized, I'm like, all right, it is time now to move forward beyond that. So for the past months, I have been reaching out to retailers. We're in a couple of stores locally here in Southeast Idaho, which is great. We also, in December of 2023, so just 5 months ago now, released our second line, which is called IMTs, which I'm wearing today.
Mhm.
And so this is an opportunity for, obviously different clothing, but I love this tee because it gives the wearer an opportunity to be edified by language, but also when you look at it too, and Rhonda, you can see this,
Yeah.
you can read the wording as well. So those words go into your mind.
They're
and
all
and
affirmation.
thoughts. They are I am statements, which is a
Yeah.
powerful, perhaps the most powerful 2 words that we have in our global language. And so this gives everyone an opportunity to be edified.
I love this. Tell everybody where they can go to purchase your items.
Yeah. So tokenclothingco.com.
That's it. Just like that. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been amazing. I hope you don't mind, but I'm probably going to ask you to come back again because you have been unbelievable, very clear. Not all my guests can speak well. So when you get somebody that really understands the value of language like you do, it's been a pleasure to have you on. So once again, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Stay tuned. We're getting ready to bring you another guest.